Hi, my name is Corey Smith. I'm the president and CEO of a local-based startup called BioVidria. We make labware used for the detection of proteins for the early diagnosis of diseases. Over the next 45 minutes, I'm going to be talking about building the dream team. More specifically, we're going to be talking about the founder's role in a startup and as it grows, building the team itself, recruiting, hiring, managing, so on and so forth, how to compensate people both in terms of cash, equity, or a mixture of both, how to build an advisory team, when a board of directors comes into play, and I also have some thoughts about companies that I've run in the past and try to give you some advice as to how to stay out of the deep end of the pool. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself and what I've done. I've been involved with high-tech companies for over 30 years. Started my career with Hewlett-Packard for 12 years, and have been president and CEO of 10 companies, and then board of directors for an additional 16. I've raised multiple rounds of financing, done lots of M&A activity, done an IPO. My background really is in marketing and sales, but at the end of the day, what really got me excited about speaking about this building the dream team, it's all about getting people to do the job for you. Probably one of the things I'm most proud of is that over the past probably 20 years, I've managed and developed what I'll say are future CEOs, people that I've hired, managed, coached, and 20 of those have gone on to become CEOs of their own companies. This slide titled The Myth, Perception versus Reality. If you're starting a company and your primary interest is, wow, look at me, I'm the boss, and look at all these things that work for me, that's sort of the myth. The reality is that that triangle really is pointed down at your head, and the comment I made here is, crap, I'm the boss. And that is, you are responsible to all the different stakeholders in the company. Customers, shareholders, investors, partners, etc. It's a big job, and getting the right people in the organization to assist you is probably the biggest thing you can do as a CEO. The role of the founder CEO, and this starts day one of your business, is after running a couple of companies, some successfully, some not, I really tried to nail down what made me, or where I should be focusing my time as a CEO. And I really came up with a model of three major things: defining direction, aligning people and resources, and then motivating. And as you can see from the slide, there are sort of cogs in a wheel that as one turns, the others turn. And if you spend most of your time focused on those three elements, and I've tried to define sort of the size or the time allocation. So with that, let me go ahead and talk about each of those components. The first is defining direction. And this is more or less setting the stage of where you want to be when you grow up, what markets and products you're going to be developing, what your growth strategy is 3 years out, the linkage of strategic and tactical plans, who you're going to have as partners and competitors, revenues, employees, facilities, international expansion, on and on and on and on. The ability to articulate that story and make it so that it's matter-of-factly is really important. And what I do is I start and think about these types of activities 3 years down the road, and in as much as I want a product line of 3 different products, I want to have achieve revenues of $15 million in year 3. I want to go ahead and have linkage of my tactical and strategic plans, so I know that in order to achieve revenues of $15 million, A, B, and C, and D all have to happen simultaneously. I want the following types of partners in place for distribution and international expansion. And the reason that's important is your ability to articulate that to all stakeholders within and outside the company is really important. You need to be able to make it visual and real, and then communicate that all of the time, so that as you grow, your key staff and actually your whole organization is able to have and articulate that strategy and that type of execution with their own metrics of how they tie into the more broad global strategy. After defining direction, the next is aligning people and resources. And there are 3 components of that. One is building your team, next is defining responsibilities, and then funding your operation. And I'll go through each of those in somewhat detail, or some detail. Aligning and building your team. The key thing there is who does what to whom. And it's about job responsibilities, performance metrics, and also org chart evolution. And what I'd recommend is developing an org chart over a 3-year period that's necessary to achieve the revenues that you've defined. And in the example I provided, 15 million. And defining an org chart that probably for 15 million in revenues is going to have somewhere in the range of 55 to 60 people. So where will those people be from a functional area? What will their responsibilities be? Who will they report to? And then back that off into year 2 and then year 1 and to where you are today. The next is hiring. It's probably the single most important thing you're going to do after defining strategy. And do keep in mind that you're building a team. It's not one individual, but rather how those people are going to be working together. Teamwork is extremely important. The attributes that I value when I look for people to hire is, first, I want them to be passionate. They're going to be spending a tremendous amount of time working and associated with all the other constituents, and it's important that they have a huge heart and really, really love what they're doing. The next is aptitude. I look for smart people, and I place experience as a secondary thing. It would be great if they have great aptitudes and experience. And when I talk about aptitude, I'm really talking about somebody that operates at a high clock speed. They're fast, they're smart, and they're quick to adapt. And the last, as I already sort of mentioned, team player and the ability to subordinate, making certain that you don't have people that are such prima donnas they're afraid of taking, or they're not willing to take on lesser responsibilities when called upon. And the last thing about hiring is the alternate is firing, is don't let a bad hire linger. They can really spoil the entire apple cart for you. And as far as managing, you need to set annual and quarterly objectives that you hold people accountable to, and they need to be tied to your strategic plan. Defining key breakthrough objectives, things that in the life of your business over the first 3 to 4 years, you may have 4 or 5, could be developing technological feasibility, your first prototype, first customer shipment, and expanding your sales organization. And you need to be able to link job responsibilities with objectives for all positions, not just for yourself or for your company, but rather how a functional manager of marketing or sales, and then their people, how that relates back through all of the objectives of the company. The last component that I mentioned was motivating, and this is probably where you're going to spend the bulk of your time. And I've really broken it down into 4 components, the first of which is teaching. Teaching people how to do things right, where you're trying to get to and why, and then correcting and reinforcing on a day-to-day basis activities of the organization. The next is adapting, and there will be times where you have to change directions or you have to change a strategy, and making certain that you can effectively adapt, but you also have to explain why you're adapting and changing things so that it becomes commonplace for them as the organization grows, they're able to do it within their own organization as well. And the last is growing people. You need to let people to be able to, at times, fail. Just make certain that it's okay if people shoot themselves in the foot, but just make certain you avoid the temporal shots. It's kind of painful. A couple things to remember: establishing a company, culture begins day one. It's not something you say, well, I'll put that off until year 3 or year 2 and I have more people. It's something that you need to start from the very beginning. The next is the shadow of the leader. People will look to you to provide what is appropriate behavior, how you conduct yourself, how you make decisions, how you manage people, and just remember that, because the organization will take on your tendencies in a big way. And the last thing is catch people doing things right. Oftentimes, I'll see people that they're very, very quick to catch people doing things wrong and reprimand them. It's more important to catch people doing right, because you'll get a better behavior pattern going forward. This next slide, I'm certain that most of you are familiar with the AzCI's Innovation Continuum. And as it pertains to building a team and growing an organization, this Innovation Continuum takes several years, multiple years with which to go through. And the point of this is that at different phases of the company's life, you're going to be focused on R&D, development, incubation, revenues, so on and so forth. It takes time to recruit people, anywhere between 3 months to 9 months. Building an advisory board may take upwards of a year. And you need to anticipate these different phases, the resource requirements you will have at each one of these stages, because you need to think as a CEO or as a founder, what's going to occur 3, 6, 9, 12 months down the road, so that you can begin preparing plans and getting people in place, so that as you achieve one of these milestones, you have people in place with which to take it forward. Failure to do that is going to cost you big gaps in terms of resources necessary to take the next step, and can really slow down the development of your organization and the progress you're making as a company. As it pertains to salary and compensation, how do you pay for people that you're going to hire? The first thing is you're going to be really cash strapped, and so I think that don't expect much of a paycheck from a startup. As you raise additional rounds of financing, as you become cash sufficient, certainly the cash component of compensation is going to increase. But I think it's important that you take the view of long term, and that really is going to involve equity participation of your employees, and I'll touch on that in a bunch more ways down the road. But new hires that can't buy into probably a 2-year period of getting below market salary probably isn't the person to hire. And you really need to dig on that issue, because it's possible that they say, oh great, I don't have a problem with the salary, but ask them, are you going to be okay with the salary for the next 24 months? And if the answer is no, or you get some concerns there, it's something you really need to pay a lot of attention to. The other thing is, as you take on outside money from investors, whether it be angels or venture money, they're not real interested in you paying big salaries to yourself or to your top executives. They want you to have a lot of skin in the game and probably be working below market rates. And the last thing is as it pertains to figuring out your compensation package, you really need to focus on what your cash flows are. And that if you cut it too thin, you're putting your company at risk. So you need to do a lot of cash flow planning to make certain that you have the cash on hand if you hit some bumps in the road. As it pertains to compensation and the specifics, a couple things. One is there's the base salary, deferred compensation, or a combination thereof. The next is going to be equity in terms of stock options, performance-based bonus or commissions, particularly for your sales organization, or breakthrough items for your development organization, and other soft benefits such as title awards, travel, equipment, so on and so forth. Each company is going to be different. Each employee that you hire is going to be different. That said, you need to have some level of consistency. Employees talk, they find out what everyone's making, and if there's some real significant inconsistencies, there are going to be problems that brew. The thing that I would recommend is putting together a 3-year hiring plan. I've spoken about that already, but think about, the first year you may have 7 to 8 employees, the next year you may have 15 to 18, and the following you may have, let's say, 50 or 55. Figure out the roles and responsibilities, who the management team is within those respective areas, what the compensation should be for those respective areas, and then also if you're thinking about issuing options, the option levels throughout the organization for that 3-year plan. I'll touch on that in more detail in a second. The only thing I'd say from a tip perspective is be really cautious with titles, option grants and base salary, is that if you give somebody a title and they're a VP and they just don't scale with the responsibility and need somebody that's greater, taking back that title is going to be really, really hard. Same thing with respect to option grants. It's a finite pool of options that are probably going to be available, and if you go ahead and issue too much to early hires, it's going to make it really hard with which to compensate people effectively on the subsequent hires where you need higher skill sets. So again, be cautious, and you can always give more, but it's really, really hard to take away. I think you're all familiar with what an org chart looks like, essentially showing chain of command or hierarchical structure of a company. And you should go ahead and put this in place and make it evolve over time, as I've mentioned. And in a little bit, I'll actually show one that I've done on a spreadsheet that allocates stock options throughout the organization for key performers. I think most of you are familiar with stock option plans. The formal term is employee stock option. It provides employees with ownership of the company through purchase of shares, and I wouldn't really say at a discount because the IRS doesn't like that, but because as you get different classifications of shares, Series A, Series B, you're going to be issuing stock options that are common stock, and they're going to be issued at a discount from preferred shares. They're a key component of almost any startup's compensation package because it really allows you with which to conserve cash. And the other thing that's important about them is employees have a vested interest in the company's success, and they can become quite valuable as the company grows and succeeds. Average for a technology startup is probably going to be between 15 to 20%, either post angel round or pre-venture money. And that's going to be for recruiting your C-level team, your VP level, as well as key contributors. The point I'd make here is as a founder, don't get hung up on how much you retain. The important thing is growing a successful business, making it valuable to outside constituents that may want to buy you or go public or whatever it may be. But focus on building the team that you need with which to have the skill sets necessary to achieve your objectives. And if you take care of that, you're probably going to be fairly successful going down the road. This slide, I've mentioned it that I was going to talk about this, is a spreadsheet showing 3-year option pool breakdown in which I've allocated 20% of the company to approximately, I think, about 55, 60 people. I have a C-level CEO, president, one of them receiving 6% of the option pool. I have 5 VPs or 4 VPs, 12 director and senior level contributors, admin support of 20 people, and an advisory board of 5. The reason that this is important to do early on is, let's say you only have 3 or 4 people in your company at the time. If you went ahead and allocated 20% of the shares or the entire option pool out to that group of people, you're not going to be able to recruit these other people and provide them deferred compensation in the form of an ESOP. So this is just an example. I went ahead and allocated approximately 360,000 shares of stock. Presuming that the company has if you achieve the objective of 15 million in revenues and an 8x multiple, you'd have a market cap value of approximately $120 million. And each one of these VPs would, their stock options at the point of time, 3 years down the road, would be valued at about $750,000 per employee. It's important that you don't go ahead and say, well, that's what you're going to get, but rather, if everything does according to plan, market stays well, that's the type of value that equity compensation could be. Over the next 4 slides or 5 slides, I'm going to go through fairly quickly what happens to the equity as the company grows and takes on other investors. To start with, research stage, you yourself, the founder, you retain 100%. Technology is still evolving, and the issue is this going to be commercially viable? Is it going to be something that works? Is it going to be something that somebody wants to buy? Let's say that the founder gets tapped out to put $50,000, $60,000 into the organization. His credit cards are tapped out, home equity's gone, IRA's gone. So he goes and turns to friends and family, and he said, gee, I need more money with which to develop a prototype for development. I know you're interested in the company. How about if you invest collectively $150,000 in order to place a pre-money valuation of $500,000. So the money comes in, the founder retains 70%, and now you have friends and family in for 30% of the company. The next stage, that was successful. And so now it's time to start recruiting more people in the organization. So you establish an ESOP program, employee stock option program, and you're going to say, well, gee, let's allocate 20% of the shares of the company on a post basis, meaning after the friends and family have come in. And so now the founder's at 56%. Things have gone well. The product is complete, and you're prepared to launch sales. You need more cash in the organization, and so you turn to angels, and it's now time to start building a real company. Angels come in, put in $500,000 at a $1.75 million pre-money valuation. The founder's now at 40%. But the important thing to note is the company is tracking relative to its plan, and that although the founder share has been cut back significantly, the valuation of the shares that the founder holds is significantly up. So now you've gone ahead and things are going swimmingly well. You're establishing channels of distribution. Revenues are going great. You're probably in the year 2, 2.5, and it's time for more money for expansion of a field sales organization and customer support organization. So you choose to go out and take on VC money. So you do a Series B round. They put in $1.5 million at a $5 million valuation. And the founder's shares are now at 28%, down from 100%. But the valuation of the company significantly stepped up, and the next stop is going to be some type of liquidity event for all the people involved. So that's what happens when you put together a multi-year capitalization table that's linked back into an ESOP program for employees, and also gives a roadmap of what you can expect from the structure from a financial perspective of your company. The next topic I'm going to talk about is the various roles of both advisors as well as board of directors. And they are very, very different. And let me first just say, let me focus on the board of directors. It's legal responsibility. They take binding action of the company. They have a fiduciary role to shareholders. It's really dictated by the bylaws of the company, and they're going to be strategically inclined, taking a long-term perspective. To contrast that with advisors, they're going to be providing advice and perspective, skill augmentation of what you don't have in place from your executive team. You probably have management experience that you don't have that can guide you through some stormy times. There can be a personal confidant, guide. More than likely, you're going to be picking people that have specific domain expertise and also that have contacts. You can start building this with just people you know, and you probably already have people in place that you know. When it comes to board of directors, that's when you get into a situation where you're going to take on outside money, and they're going to dictate that you put a board of directors in place. And the one piece of advice that I provide is let's say that you end up, after taking money on from outside investors, you're going to have a 5-person board. Make certain you get somebody on the board that may have come as your board of advisors, or somebody else that is somebody at your choosing and not at the VC's choosing. The other thing I'd say is the minute your company starts having upticks and your press releases and so on and so forth, there are going to be a lot of people that come to you from this environment, and either wanting to go ahead and have a fee-based system or have equity. Go back to what you put together as a spreadsheet and be cautious about how much stock you provide different advisors or advisors, and also make certain that they're prepared with which to give you long-term commitment. If you don't see that and they're just looking for a quick hit from a financial standpoint or stock and not really be committed to your success, they're probably not the right people to have involved as an advisor of your company. So now let me talk more specifically about advisors, and in a second I'll talk about a board of directors. Sort of touched on this already, but advisors can be most helpful with introductions and concepts and technology and product planning, marketing and sales, maybe helping you with some of your financial stuff or raising money in operations. What they're not going to do for you, and what you shouldn't expect them to do, is run your day-to-day operations or be involved with you on a very invasive way with your company. And the only reason I mention that is to set your expectations so that you're not looking at having an advisor essentially be a functional manager of development or marketing and sales or something else. Very different responsibilities. It may be that if they want to do that they should be considered as an employee as opposed to an advisor of the company. The second thing about advisors is, where do you find them and how do you compensate? I think it's pretty obvious. Friends and family could be advisors. I'd be very cautious about that. Could be instructors, school referrals, CPAs, attorneys. Could be people that you seek out that have been involved in your industry or aspects of your industry that could provide you some excellent advice. And you're probably going to be compensated. And some people may just want to be philanthropic. Thrill of doing it again is going to be enough for them. It's going to be unlikely, but it could be. Potential of future involvement or association, i.e. they could be a future hire. They could be somebody that wants to be associated with the company in some capacity for expansion of distribution or raising money. More than likely, you're going to be providing them options to participate. And as far as cash, I'd be very, very careful. It's not a real good place to be spending cash because it instantly changes the dynamics from being an advisor to a consultant. And those are very different roles, and be very cautious. As a matter of fact, I'd really recommend staying away from that. Now, in terms of the board of directors, I've already mentioned that it's going to be mandated upon taking on outside money, and more than likely it's going to be after you've taken on your first round of angel investment. You're more than likely going to have an outside director, so you'll have people that it's going to be you, possibly another person from your company, a angel, and potentially a Series A or Series B in terms of a VC guy. So you're probably going to have a independent director, and you're going to compensate them with equity. Their role is big picture and financial oversight and C-level hiring, i.e. hiring a CFO, CEO. They're going to be very integrally involved in that. As I mentioned a couple slides ago, be proactive in advance of raising money to shape and create the board of directors. More than likely, with a small company, it's going to be a 5-person board. You're looking for somebody that's willing to, as the independent director, somebody that can give you 3+ years of time commitment. Seek directors who will commit sufficient enough time to have a general understanding of your business. However, their job is not going to be to run your business or to be there on a day-to-day basis. So they'll be looking at big picture. It's likely that that one director is going to roll off as the second raise of money occurs, and you just have to figure out how you're going to compensate that person. Probably vest their options when they roll off. They're probably going to ask for D&O insurance, so they're protected in the event that there's a liability action against the company. I'd recommend quarterly meetings at the outset, and if you do it more often than that, it's probably impeding on their time. And the last point I'd make is advisory board and board of directors can coexist. They're not mutually exclusive. Your advisory board then is going to take on more of a role of domain expertise and functionality or functional expertise, whereas the board of directors is going to take on the fiduciary responsibility from a legal standpoint. In preparing your business plan, you'll need to include all of the items that I've just covered in terms of what your org structure is going to be like, who those people are, their bios, their backgrounds, and their duties and responsibilities. Management compensation in terms of agreements, how they're compensated, ESOP plans you have in place, the role and who specifically are on your advisory board of directors, and lastly, other shareholder rights and restrictions in terms of employment agreements and capitalization table and those types of things. This is an area that you really can demonstrate that you know what you're doing and that your company has some legs. Because if you thought through who's going to be on your advisory and board of directors, how you're compensating your executive team, people will see that that you're really meaning to do a great job in running your business. Let me go ahead and give a couple of final thoughts, and I have a final slide after this. But let me give you a couple of things that I've learned over 20-some years of running companies. The first is, don't fall victim to the Superman syndrome. Your effectiveness is going to be viewed as measured by the output of the overall organization and not your own individual work. Your individual work is defining direction, aligning people, and motivating. And if you do an effective job at that, you're going to be developing a high-performance team, and the likelihood that you achieve success is great. Always ask yourself if you're doing somebody else's job. If the answer is yes, then you're probably trying to be a Superman as opposed to being an effective leader. Next is a simple strategy will always prevail over a complex one. And the example I use here is, let's say you have 5 major breakthroughs you have to achieve over the next 3 years to achieve that $15 million in revenue. And if each of them only have an 80% chance of success, 0.8 to the 5th power is only 32.8%. And so you need to figure out how a simpler strategy with better execution can increase at 80 percentile up to 90 percentile, which gives a much bigger number in terms of likelihood of success. The next one is good market characteristics will often reward even mediocre execution. Pick the market you're going after very carefully. Pick markets that are growing, pick markets that have good growth characteristics and that aren't dominated by people that have boatloads of resources. The other comment is external constituents don't live your day-to-day. What I mean by that is you're spending 24/7, 365 in your business, and you may have an advisor or a director, and they're going to be involved for no more than maybe 2 to 3 hours per month or even per quarter. You can't over-communicate to them, and you need to learn how to effectively manage upwards as well as downwards. That means how to manage your board of directors, how to manage your advisors, how to manage your investors. And the last thing about investors is their motivation is simple. When do I get my 10x cash back? And they're not going to get you're probably really passionate about your business, and you need to be. And you'd love to tell them all about all the cool things that are happening and how much you're learning and how so-and-so has done a great job here. And it's all about what they're going to be most interested in is, when are you going to sell the business? When are you going to go public? When do I get my cash back? That's their motivation, and it's really important that when you communicate to investors that you think about that prior to engaging in conversation. So in summary, we've talked about what the founder's role is, how to build the team, compensating and ownership, building advisory, building board of directors. The thing that I'd recommend you to do is do the work of doing a SWOT analysis of what you have in place and what you don't have in place relative to the things that I've talked about. Identifying your team's strengths and weaknesses and how you intend to put plans in place with which to address. Focus on the talent you have in place. Recognize the people you need to add going forward. Learn how to talk about what the vision's 3 years down the road, what it's going to be like, the things and successes you're going to be having, the types of people you're going to have in place, what the organization structure looks like, and include that in your elevator pitch. Because the more that you can talk about in your elevator pitch what it's going to be like in the future and the things you're going to put in place with which to achieve that, the greater the likelihood you get funded, the greater the likelihood you're going to attract and retain high-quality individuals, and the greater the likelihood that you're able to achieve your breakthrough objectives that allows you with which to get to the promised land. Thanks.